So this morning, instead of doing a traditional sermon, I thought it would be more fun to allow you to ask me questions. I know that there were a lot of questions on Thursday, but I also know that not everybody was able to be there. I wasn't able to spend that much time with everyone. And so this is an open invitation for you now to ask me questions. I think you've seen my bio before already, but okay, mics. Thank you.
Welcome, welcome, welcome.
Thank you.
Hope to have your name tag next week.
Okay.
I'd like to hear about all the places you've lived in your life. Where are you from and where have you lived?
Okay. So I am from the Cleveland suburbs in Ohio. I went to Kent State University. I spent about 20 years living there after I graduated a few times. Then let's see here. I moved. So I grew up in South Euclid, and my dad and my stepmother lived in Bay Village. So I spent time on both the east and west sides of Cleveland, which if you are familiar with Cleveland, you know that's a thing. So let's see here. Then I moved back to Shaker, which is on the east side of Cleveland when I was working at the VA. Then I took a job working as a hospital chaplain in Danville, Pennsylvania, which is central eastern Pennsylvania. It's about an hour north of Harrisburg. And then I moved down here to the Tampa area, greater Tampa area. I was serving our congregation in Tarpon Springs. So I was living outside of that area and then here. And apart from all of that, while I was in graduate school and finishing an undergraduate degree, I also did a semester abroad in Volgograd, Russia. I do speak Russian. Do I speak it well anymore? Probably not, but I love listening to it. Spasiba.
Thank you so much for this opportunity to get to know you a little bit more. So when did you come to Unitarian Universalism and what was that path?
So October 1st will be my 18-year anniversary of coming through the doors of a Unitarian Universalist church. The path, let's see. I was always interested in religion. I grew up in a very multicultural area, and so I was exposed to a lot of different religions, but had a lot of reservations around more traditional Christianity as I had been exposed to it at that time. But never, I was raised unchurched. We went to church on Christmas Eve, sometimes on Easter. When we went to church on Easter, it was usually a different church than the one that we went to on Christmas Eve, which was my grandparents' church. So I didn't really get exposed to a lot of spiritual or religious stuff in that kind of a setting. And also my family doesn't talk about religious stuff pretty much at all. I, at this tender age as a minister, cannot tell you the theologies of any of my parents. And my parents are divorced and both remarried. So I've got 4 and I can't tell you what any of them believe about anything. But I was always really interested in religion and, learned it about different things when I was going through school. But it was always like, oh, it's so nice that these people believe that kind of thing. And just as I was aging and going through different experiences, felt a real calling in my core to find a spiritual community. And I had been attending AA meetings with a partner who was an alcoholic and just really loved it, really began to understand the power and potential of a fellowship and community in that setting and realized that I would love to find something like that. And I met someone who told me that I should really check out a Unitarian Universalist church, that they were my people, and he would know because his sister was a retired Unitarian Universalist minister. And so that's how I came to Unitarian Universalism, and I've been here ever since. Glad you did. Thank you. Me too.
Welcome. And as we say for the curious and the seekers, I am very curious. Are you single? Do you have pets? What are the foods that you like? What is your favorite seasonal service to give? I better stop there.
Okay. Yes, I am currently single. I have 2 cats, William and Gemma. They're both tuxedos. William is black and long-haired, and Gemma is gray and short-haired. And they are just nutty, as cats can be. Favorite foods? I actually really like vegetables. And I am vegetarian and gluten-free, so this kind of narrows my window a bit. I do also have a very mean sweet tooth. And favorite seasonal services, I really, as I've become a minister, like I have my favorites, but I also have come to love all of them for different reasons. I was recently talking with somebody, I can't remember if it was this congregation or the other congregation now, but I think it was this one, about doing a Blue Christmas service. And I'm like, well, yes, I think that's important, but theologically I come at it from a different perspective, and I usually do those on Sunday mornings. And so there's stuff. I really love Halloween. I also really love Easter. And I love Christmas, and I love Epiphany, and Passover, the high holy days. Yeah, so there's a lot of them that I love for all different reasons, because they all have something different to offer us.
Good morning and welcome. I'm just curious about, what is it that drew you to this congregation? What made you decide that this is where you wanted to be?
I feel like part of that involves conversation about why I left where I left, but I'm going to set that aside for now. So I've been in Florida for about 4 years, and I've actually really enjoyed my time here. I kind of think of it as warm and sort of meaner Ohio. But I've enjoyed my time here. So I really wanted to stay here, and recognizing that it's a very challenging environment to serve in terms of politically and theologically. Recognizing that a number of my colleagues can't come here even if they wanted to, just because it's not safe for them or for their family members. So staying in Florida was actually a priority for me. When I went into search this year, there weren't any settled positions in Florida that I was interested in. And so I met with some different congregations and just did not connect with them very much at all. And then I went back into search, kept looking, and all y'all had your paperwork updated and on the website by then. And so I said, I'm willing to explore this opportunity to do the yoked congregational setting. And when I met with the search team, things were just clicking. It was like they were just ready to start planning 5 and 10 years out with me. And I was kind of like, we need to sign a contract first, but thank you. I'm very excited about this. It felt really good, and it felt like a really good match. And I interviewed with 4 other congregations and had not had that experience. So that was part of what drew me here. I also know Reverend Tracy. We went to school together. We overlapped some at Meadville Lombard. And I know Reverend Janet, not super well, but she was still serving here when I came down to Florida. So I got to know her a little bit on Zoom. So, and Reverend Cynthia. So I had a sense of kind of where you guys were, and really enjoyed listening to stories. So I'm really excited to be here.
When you said I think it was your VA experience, you said was in Shaker. Is that Shaker Heights?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was thinking about that because I thought I read that in your bio. And Shaker Heights is a progressive, intentional community It didn't do so well in that book, Little Fires Everywhere. I intended to read about it and be so inspired, but they had their issues too.
Oh, for sure.
And I was thinking along those lines recently about intentional community, how hard it is to build beloved intentional community, which is something I hope we're working towards here. I thought maybe I'd ask you a little bit about your insight about how hard it is and what does it take to build an intentional progressive community.
I watched the series on something, Netflix, Hulu, streaming somewhere. So I watched I haven't read the book yet. I did buy it recently, but I watched it when it was streaming, and I was watching it and I was like, there was a lot of like, oof, oof, oof. And then it was like, oh, there it is. Yeah, that is, it's not just a really white thing, but there's also part of it that I really identified with as an Ohioan, especially from the Cleveland area. And it was just like, oh yes, yep, that is like all the harm that we do all at once, just right there. And this is why I moved away from here. I talk with my hands a lot, in case you had not observed that already. So I need that freedom to be able to express myself. Yeah, I mean, it really takes a lot of work and a willingness to engage in the hard, painful conversations and recognizing when we've messed up and holding the fact that both it is our fault, as in we are the one through whom the harm has happened, but also it is not our fault because it has to do with the cultures of the way that we've been encultured and grown up and learned how to be in this world. It's really challenging, and it can be really easy to stay at that superficial level and just be like, oh, like we'll build a multicultural community. And I think this is one of the reasons why our congregations struggle so much, is because sometimes our congregations are not willing to have these really deep, hard conversations. And we have to be able to do that because we're going to mess up and we're going to keep messing up and everybody's going to mess up. This is something that I learned in seminary. I remember having a conversation with a colleague my very first year. And she was taking a class, and she's Black, and she was just reflecting on the class, had nothing to do with me. And she was just like, I just don't know if I can ever be my full self around white people. And it just hurt so much because I've known what it's been like in my own life, not to be able to be in a safe environment, to be able to share my own whole self. And at that moment, I was just like, I just have to keep doing this work. And, just recognizing the fact that I'm going to cause harm, and also that harm is going to be caused, and what role can I have in continuing to bring us back together so that we can grow instead of just causing more harm. So that kind of answers the question. Okay.
Hello and welcome.
Thank you.
Really happy that you're here. Excuse me. I'm curious to know how you interpret the story you told about Zora and the church and the lamps. What is the meaning for you?
I really love how explicit it is about how not only do we bring the light into the space, but we also take it back out into the world. And it's a both and, right? And I think that they feed each other, that you can't hold the light as well, I don't think, in the world if you're not having a way to feed that light. So that was I think that's one of the most important parts for me.
Well, I'll take you outside of the building and ask you to share with us your talents or hobbies or interests. Are you a mountain climber or a kayaker? What are your interests?
I'm actually a very not interesting person in terms of what my life looks like. Up here, it's like super interesting, but out in the world, it's not as much. I get overstimulated pretty quickly. I am an avid cross stitcher, as some of you may have recognized from when I was here before last week. I was cross stitching while I was listening to the service. I am neurodivergent and probably have some ADHD or something. And so like my brain just like shoots off in all directions. And so if I don't have something to keep me occupied, I will not be paying attention. So that's part of the reason why I cross stitch a lot. When I'll be in meetings and I'll be cross stitching and I'll be doing other things, because it helps keep me focused on what is happening before me. I also just do it. I think it's a really good spiritual practice for me. And I am on my 13th piece. I started cross stitching again in July of 2018. And I'm on my 13th piece since then. And all the pieces except one so far, I have made for friends, colleagues, and family, except for 2 pieces that we used to fundraise for the rescue that I was volunteering with for a little while. I have volunteered in the past. But I was working a 3/4 time position, so I'm not sure how much or if I will be able to volunteer now that I'm working for 2 congregations. I love to read. I do like to write. I really spend a lot of time with my cats. I stream a lot of stuff on Netflix and Hulu and all of those different things. I don't have a television. Yeah.
Okay, this question is from Donna Jean, who's online here. And she asks, what can we do for you as a congregation and as individuals to be most supportive and welcoming? She also adds, your voice is so gentle, and many other people have said that online too. Your voice is so gentle and your cadence comfortable to listen to. Welcome and thank you for telling us about yourself. So how, in other words, what can we as a congregation, as individuals do to be most supportive and welcoming to you?
Thank you. Everybody has been really lovely. I've been welcomed so many times. And I was telling my dad last week when we were on the phone, I said, it's so weird to just walk into a place where everybody pronounces our name correctly. I know I've trained you to do that, but like it's still like just off the bat, just having so many people just say my name correctly. And he said, I've never had that happen in my entire life. Which is not surprising. It's not, people are like, how is your last name pronounced? And I say Spaude, just like you would never guess, which I've learned from all these years of living with that last name. I don't know yet, other than to sort of be patient with me. I also know that I am gonna want some kind of a different setup here so I don't smack the heck out of that mic. And have the freedom to be able to use my arms as seems natural. So there will be things, but right now I'm just trying to get my stride, I guess. And I do appreciate how welcoming everybody has been. I just almost always the first thing that people say is welcome. We're so glad you're here, and I really appreciate that. And thank you for the comments about my voice. It will not always sound quite like this, but it will sound like this a lot.
Again, let me say welcome. My question is, what have you experienced or been a part of in your prior ministry, whether in a congregation or when you were a chaplain, that you hope to see here or would like to see here?
I'm not sure. And so part of that is because my ministerial formation experiences have been a bit untraditional for parish ministers. I served as a director of religious education for a small program for 2 years while I was in seminary. I also did my 2-year half-time internship while I was in seminary. I left that and did 2 years of chaplaincy training, a residency and a fellowship at the VA. And then I went and worked for 2 years as a chaplain in a level 1 trauma center hospital in central Pennsylvania. And then I came into parish ministry here in Florida. So I've had a lot of varied experiences. Apart from being a lay leader and doing stuff in my home congregation as well. I will say one of the things that I have really appreciated about just the surface getting to know this congregation has been that y'all seem pretty healthy. There's definitely some potential for growth, but you're starting it from a really good place, which is a nice change of pace for me. I don't know. I'm curious to see what happens. I was also affiliated with a congregation when I was in Pennsylvania, and they're doing some really fun, lovely stuff right now with the minister who's there. And I don't know that we can necessarily replicate it, but I would like to experiment more. I think that's where I am sort of in my own place and journeying through ministry, is wanting to experiment and see what happens and find more ways to bring a bit more to a worship experience. So that would be a starting place for me. Yeah.
Thanks for indulging a second question. One of the things that I think we face is the size of the congregation being static, for one thing, excuse me, but also just the difficulty in bringing the message to other people about TriUU and about the Unitarian Church. And this is a stronghold of Republican, very Christian people. And so I find even in my own community that when I said to somebody that I attend UU, and because she asked where I go to church, and she said, that's not a church. It's okay. All right. So my question is about, do you have any thoughts about building a larger congregation, and will that be one of the goals that you have while you're here?
Is your question related or completely different? Okay. So my approach to ministry is that I don't inherently have goals for you. You have goals that I want to help you live into. And also, I should also add that I'm really grateful that everybody's so excited that I'm here. And this is a one-year contract right now. So I don't know how long I will be able to stay with you. It just depends on how our relationship goes over the course of this year. So I also am not going to be making plans for 10 years down the road, because I don't know that I will be here in 10 years. As far as growing the congregation, it's tricky. But I do have some ideas. And so one thing that will happen is that I do preach from the scriptures. Even though I was raised unchurched, I do preach from the scriptures sometimes. I think it's really important that we do that, because we're surrounded by Christian people mostly, and it's helpful for us to be able to engage in narratives that other people are having around us, that often we hear and we're just like that's not important. But the thing is, it is important. And if we're going to want to be conversation partners, we need to be able to figure out how to have those conversations. And of course, what I am going to offer is not going to be what anybody else is going to offer, because it comes from a very Unitarian Universalist perspective. But I still think it's important that we at least have some comfortability and entree into having that engagement. Yeah, it's funny. Sometimes people, it's not a church or whatever. But I will also add that I had the experience in 2 different chaplaincy settings where there were people who were very conservative that were also students and or staff, and over and over and over again, they would say to me, like, it was so frustrating to them. I'm a non-theist, so I don't believe in God. I'm a humanist. I'm a universalist, right? I don't like none of this stuff. And yet they would just be like, but you're so kind to people. And you really help them. And it was really hard for them to be confronted with that reality when I was not a Christian. And so I think there's also a power in just continuing to show up as who we are and do the things that we do that will help people understand that, A, we're not going away, but also like we can still have an impact even though we don't share beliefs with other people in the community. And I know that you have a question, but she has a question and we really need to wrap up.
I'm really impressed by the CPE training because I know that's very comprehensive. But I was interested in your sermon preparation, how you go about that, what's your approach to sermon preparation?
So I think that sermons and really services as a whole are a conversation that we're having. So it's one of the tricky things of like coming out of the gate and just being like, yes, please preach to us. And it's like, but I don't know what to say to you. I don't know you well enough to know what to say to you. I read and I watch stuff and I see where the Spirit's moving and I talk with colleagues, and it just depends on where we are in the year. And has anybody watched the show The Bear? Yeah, so I preached on The Bear, so you might hear that sermon back before it got as popular as it is now. Sometimes I will preach on movies, sometimes I will preach on a book I read, sometimes I will invite somebody from the congregation to engage in a conversation with me about a topic. So there's all sorts of different things that are going on. My mind is a really intense place, so it just depends on where things are at the time.
Okay, last question then,
Okay.
I guess. From Joyce, what is your experience with meditation practices? And do you consider this to be an important practice to be offered to the congregation? Have you experimented with different forms of meditation practice?
I do small amounts of meditation in terms of like sitting meditation. I kind of think of my cross stitching as a form of meditation, and there the rhythm of the ups and the downs, and I love watching as the pattern starts to make an image on the canvas that I'm working on. There are definitely things that I've worked on before that don't look like anything for a really long time. But you know, it's fun to watch as something starts to emerge. I do think that meditation is something that can be really helpful for congregations, for members of congregations to experience. What was the other question? Oh, not really, other than, you know, like I cross stitch, there's coloring meditation, those kinds of things, I think can be really helpful. Yeah, that's all I have, I think. It's not one of my core spiritual practices as it is right now. But I think that's all for now. So, thank you.